if I get an early pick, I'm just taking names.
There's no point to take Strat, right? Like, is there a point to take Strat in a best ball format?
And you have changed your name to Stephen A. Swift. You are the leader. You are a different group of Swifties.
I think Jameson Williams is going to outscore. He's going to outpoint Amon-Ra St. Brown this year.
The stats are kind of fugazi, man.
Come on.
Let's go.
There's like 50 feet of shit and then Kyler and Edwards.
I think it's a buying opportunity for the Chiefs, actually.
If you ever see me take Bryce Young as a quarterback, even as a backup, smack me when you see me in Vegas.
I'm all about Devontae Adams.
They're hurting their own team. You could just turn around later and take, Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin.
I just go, what the fuck are they doing at running back?
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to a Sunday primetime FFPC Main Event live draft coverage. No Terp today, no Jake today, but no worries, because I'm joined by Fantasy Alarm's head of content, an award-winning host on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, Howard Bender. As he always does, every August, we look forward to Howard's coverage of the FFPC Main Event with us. Howard, thank you so much for joining us again.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. You guys might have to pull down that Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams call from last year off of your intro. But you know what? Listen, I always look forward to finding out what I'm going to be wrong about this year.
I include both the good and the bad. Our last live draft coverage, we had Sean Green, Ryan Kramer from the Sports Gambling Podcast Network on. Balky hosted that coverage last Friday. And in the intro, it's them saying, like, what the fuck are they doing at running back? That was about Javonte Williams and the Cowboys. They were texting me after, like, what was that about? And yeah, you got to love it. I mean, God knows me, Terp, Jake on these years have had a litany of horrible takes. So chat is already popping off. Howard, we briefly, obviously the first round's going on. We'll get back to that. But what I want to start is every seemingly fit fantasy player's favorite receiver this year is Luther Burden. Leaves practice yesterday, comes out that he has a groin injury, and all the reports are that he's going to miss a little bit of time, but shouldn't miss regular season. But it seems very much like an unknown right now. So that's kind of our big news story this Sunday. So I want to ask you your thoughts on the Luther Burden injury. And Fantasy Mojo tweeted out earlier today, it was weird, yesterday after this, he actually had his highest pick in the main event at the 312 and also his lowest at the 512. So if you're entering a main event draft, what are you doing with Luther Burden with this kind of unknown groin injury that might impact him?
I mean, I'm probably just treating him the same way as I've been treating him. If he's there when I feel it's an appropriate time, I'll take him. The injury situation here, I'd be a little bit more nervous if this was his first season with Ben Johnson. It's always tough when you've got a young player and he's learning a new playbook, but he's been dealing with this one now. Now, were they going to increase his role? And obviously with no DJ Moore, sure, probably, but I don't necessarily think that the missed time is going to be that much of an adverse effect on him. I mean, I'm hoping that the masses are like, oh no, great. The masses are always the same, right? You see a red X or a cross or, whatever, an injury tag next to a player name, and all of a sudden it always puts somebody into like a different mindset. So hopefully it'll kind of knock the price down, because Burden's been pretty expensive there, right? It's coming off in the fourth round for the most part is where I've seen him go. So if I can get him in the fifth, I'll be very happy to do so.
Howard, let me ask you, Team 8 Hat Fry, the earliest I've seen Justin Jefferson in the mid-tide, I should say, for the earliest he's gone at the 108. A lot of positive reports for Kyler Murray. He's emerging. Are these what is your opinion on Kyler Murray, his impact on Justin Jefferson? And are these positive reports a boon for Justin Jefferson? Do we see his ADP kind of rise into maybe this mid-first round like we kind of saw here?
I think you are going to see his ADP rising the more clear reports come through that it is going to be Kyler Murray and not JJ McCarthy. Right now, I'd say Kyler Murray's probably taking 2/3 of the snaps with the ones. For the most part, JJ McCarthy is working with the second team offense. I think we know Kyler Murray's got some, strong capabilities. He can chuck the ball downfield. He can roll out and he can find, the receiver. It's a matter of where his security blanket is going to be, right? His security blanket has been dropping it off to his tight end. If you can consider the fact that Justin Jefferson, who can run, as many underneath routes as he does, intermediary and vertical routes, then, I think that he can get in groove with Kyler Murray. I think they can kind of have that match. I think that it would be more preferable for him to be looking for Justin Jefferson than it would be to look for a TJ Hawkinson or even a Jordan Addison for that matter. So I think the more that we're comfortable with the fact that it's going to be Kyler Murray, I do think you'll see his ADP. I don't think it's going to jump up. I mean, this is the earliest I've seen him go. I don't think you're going to see it jump up into the Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua range, but I could say, this area here right after, for me, it would be right after Amon-Ra St. Brown, but it seems like an appropriate value.
Howard, I got to talk about the back end of this round and the start of the second round. 6 running backs go in a row. 3 teams start running back. Team 10, Jonathan Taylor and Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker, another player seeing his ADP rise into that early second. Foo Fighters with Aston Genty and Chase Brown, and then Big Dogs out of the 12th spot with James Cook and Omarion Hampton. Out of those 6 running backs, which one do you like the best? You can tell that just
that's like asking me if I like chocolate ice cream or if I like chocolate chip ice cream. I mean, listen, I'll take any of these 6 backs, any of them. I've been basically coming out of most drafts where I'm picking towards the tail end with basically any combination of Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton, Chase Brown, and Kenneth Walker. I don't mind Jonathan Taylor and James Cook. They just really haven't been available to me at that point because, when I take Genty first. I'm a big fan of, Clint Kubiak's system. I'm a big fan of the improvements that he and Rick Dennison are making to that Raiders offensive line. And I just, knowing the scheme and knowing how much, volume Ashton Genty is going to get, he's my top guy. I love Omarion Hampton next from that crew just simply because of what Mike McDaniel does. But, I mean, if you're looking at it from a draft strategy standpoint, we actually tracked this at Fantasy Alarm, and Andrew Cooper and I had, big discussions about this, looking at what the trends were dating back to, I think we went back to 2022 is really where we were. We were looking for that height of 0 RB because you were dealing with an era where everybody was drafting running back heavy because, you had your Marshall Faulks and your LaDainian Tomlinsons and your Sean Alexanders and over the years it was always a very running back centric kind of a thing. And then all of a sudden it started to flip a little bit and you started to see it wasn't so much the teams that went robust RB. It was the teams that maybe went, anchor RB or they ended up with 2. I think the trend that we saw was in 2022, the people who you saw grabbing their 2 running backs very early in their draft and then turning their focus to the wide receiver position as opposed to turning their focus to quarterback or tight end or to keep going with the running back. That's really in that era in 2022. That's kind of what won a lot of these big time contests. And so as you move forward and you look, it was in 2023, that was the height of 0 RB. And so you started seeing much, over the next 2 years, you saw fewer running backs being drafted early, more wide receiver, heavy drafts going. And now what we're seeing here is that we're seeing that kind of that arc. It goes all the way up to the 0 RB formula, and now it's starting to go back down, and people right now are drafting a little bit more running back heavy because that's what they've seen over the last 2 seasons. It's always a reaction to what we saw last year, always a reaction.
I do. There was a question in the chat for you about maybe if you could also elaborate specifically why do you like Ashton Genty over James Cook? The comment was kind of James Cook has no competition there in that Buffalo backfield.
James Cook doesn't have any competition in that backfield except for, you've got Ty Johnson's usually on the field typically in a lot of 2-minute drill work. They bring Ty Johnson in, sometime around like the 15, just inside the red zone, you'll start seeing that. The thing that I love about Cook and the thing that I don't worry so much about with his touchdowns is that Joe Brady just stays nice and safe, right? He's either going to have Josh Allen run it in or he's going to hand it off. And that's what happens inside the green zone in Buffalo. But, James Cook is not always on the field for that. You do have the poaching of Josh Allen. I think Cook is a fantastic guy. I look at what Genty is capable of, and I look at what we've seen from like Kubiak and Dennison from their run scheme. Because, listen, I like Joe Brady, but Joe Brady would love to just dink and dunk his way downfield also. And so I think that what we're looking at here with Genty is just a more, it's going to be a more expansive role. He's going to be that bell cow over there. He's not competing for touches with anyone. Mike Washington is not competing for touches over there. Sincere McCormick is not competing for touches over there. So, I think that you're splitting hairs. So I'm looking at, a guy who I think in Genty who can be a little bit more explosive all around. You don't really see, James Cook. I know they're saying that they want to get him a little bit more involved in the passing game in Buffalo, but we hear that every year.
Mm-hmm. I have some Genty stats for our kind of audience that I really like, which was Genty in terms of his carry share inside the 10-yard line was at 84% last year. But the Raiders just didn't make it down. They had, I believe, they almost ranked dead last in the league in getting down into the 10-yard line. And then Clint Kubiak, kind of what you were saying, is in his history of his teams, when his teams get into the 10, he actually has one of the highest percentages of actually running the ball. Because when the Raiders did actually get into the 10, they threw the ball almost 65% of the time. Factor that in, he had a top 7 target share at the running back position. And as you said, he's one of the most explosive running backs in the league. I think there's a lot to like about Genty. We've actually seen him at times get up into that 106, 107. His range just kind of starts there down into this end of the first round. I'm buying all the Ashton Genty like you are. Howard, I want to ask you.
I just want to say this for the chat. We saw Ty Johnson just left practice today as far as that goes with an apparent knee injury. Nothing set. We don't know the nature of the work, but you know what? Yes, that might take Ty Johnson out of action for a little bit. That doesn't mean that everything's going to still fall onto James Cook. We see when Buffalo's up ahead that Ray Davis is on the field churning it out, right? And he's the one who's killing the clock. Genty will be the guy killing the clock in Buffalo. They're not going to in Las Vegas. They don't have somebody over there who they can just kind of pile onto at that point. Because also I don't think that you're going to see the Raiders jumping out to these big massive leads anyway, where it would require a guy just to kill the clock.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, Colton Miller back, Tyler Linderbaum. They had one of the worst O-lines in recent memory last year. So yeah, I think there's a lot to like by Genty. As you kind of said, there's nothing by any means wrong with James Cook. I think Cook has proven that he can, though, put up incredibly productive seasons, survive even with the Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, Josh Allen touches. But I think Genty's upside comparatively to Cook, I think, is immense based on the season he had last year with all that went wrong and now all the improvements they made. Howard, I want to ask you 2 receivers go in the second round, one concerning injury note, one a positive injury note. Rashee Rice goes at the 207. He had left practice late this week. Along with his litany of other injuries he suffered at time, let alone the off-the-field issues that seem to be always lurking around the corner. Do you think Rashee Rice going at the 207 is a bit of a reach here for Team 6? And then after you answer that one, I want to get to Malik Neighbors. But let's start on Rice at the 207. Is that early? Is that right with Patrick Mahomes looking good? Or where are you at on Rashee Rice this year?
I think it's a little early for me. I would probably take Drake London, A.J. Brown over Rashee Rice. I'd take Nico Collins over Rashee Rice probably as well. I get it, right? This is something that you and I were talking about coming into this show, right? the upside factor, the what if. With what we've seen from a healthy Patrick Mahomes and a healthy Rashee Rice on the field together, they've been explosive. The problem is that that's been very, very limited right now. Whether it's injuries for Rice, injuries for Mahomes, suspension for Rice. So we know that there can be some explosiveness there. We don't get that with any kind of consistency. Are we suddenly going to get that this year for that kind of consistency? I don't really know. I mean, I get it. I have shares of Rashee Rice in numerous tournament leagues, but am I going to like sit there and kind of overblow it? I think that a lot of people, especially those who draft in big tournament, contests, always lean into the upside more. And while that's great at times, wouldn't you rather have something with a little bit more stability? I'd rather take like a Drake London, who I know is going to be an absolute target monster in Atlanta, and not take a guy like Rashee Rice. If I want to take my upside guy, then let me take Christian Watson as opposed to Rashee Rice. It's much less of an investment, and frankly, there's plenty of upside there too.
I think the Drake London shout out, like him going at the 208, I really thought with all the positive press reports, just at minimum with how he performed last year, just when he was healthy prior to the injuries he suffered between his target share, he was on pace for just a monster season. I'm surprised that he's not going earlier in the second, but we'll talk about maybe Drake London later. My second part of my question, positive injury news. Malik Neighbors, we saw at points touching the 5th round with all that uncertainty regarding his knee surgery and his return. There was obviously video from celebrity softball games where he looked rough, but he's looking great at camp. There's a ton of positive press. He's not going on the pup by all reports. He's tracking to be ready by week 1, and the ADP is skyrocketing up. This is the earliest he has gone in the last week in the main event. He goes at the 212. First time he's touched the second round. Gosh knows how long. What are you doing with Malik Neighbors with all this positive reports on his recovery from pretty major knee surgery?
Well, I mean, I've kind of in drafts since he's been back at camp and the reports have been coming in positively. I haven't taken him because he keeps getting drafted before I'm ready to grab him. I mean, I was sitting there. Was it Dave Richard from CBS? He had tweeted something out about Malik Neighbors, and I was like, remember back in the day when you could get him in the late 4th round because people were so scared of him, and now he's here he is back into the 2nd round. So I'm a big fan of Malik Neighbors. I don't necessarily know if I want him as my wide receiver 1. Just because there's some uncertainty with Jackson Dart. There's always some uncertainty with recovering from an injury like that. But I mean, yeah, if I was sitting there, if I was one of those guys, with Chase or Puka or JSN, Jefferson or Amon-Ra, I would definitely be looking at a guy like Malik Neighbors just to have him as my number 2, because if he could perform as a top, a top pick, I mean, what a great 1-2 punch that would be.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a very interesting start there for Team 1. Obviously, when you start, your first 3 picks are running back, receiver, tight end. You're trying to draft 3 guys and be the top overall player at their position. But Gibbs, Neighbors, and Loveland certainly have that opportunity there for Team 1. I want to ask you a question from the chat. Sean Green, he wants kind of back to our first-round running back conversation. He says, where does Howard have CMC in his rankings? Are you worried about the huge touch total from last year?
It's so funny. My feelings about CMC are in a wild spot with a lot of other people. And I'll say this is how I equate it. I'm pulling up my you want what, full point PPR rankings? Is that what we're looking for here? All right, so let me just pick out exactly where I have them so that there's no mistake about it. I have CMC 8th on my running back rankings.
Wow. Okay.
And I'll tell you what, I mean, listen, an amazing talent. He's absolutely an amazing talent. I won a buttload last year off of the McCaffrey Jonathan Taylor 1-2 punch at the back end of the draft.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous how these two basically carried me. And I know that, Jonathan Taylor had some rough weeks with when Daniel Jones got hurt. right? And then CMC was still picking up the pace there. And he was fantastic throughout the entire season. I look at my work with CMC after last year. It's like when you're walking away from the blackjack table. You sit down at the blackjack table, you buy in for 500, and you're sitting there with 5K in front of you at the moment. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to walk away. I'm going to go up to my room. I'm going to wash my face. I'm going to pleasure myself. Whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to go walk away for right now because I'm up this money and I feel good about it, right? I mean, the heater happened, and that's great. That's how I feel with Christian McCaffrey. I won a ton last year with Christian McCaffrey, and then I sat there and I watched him last year, in the playoffs come out. The shoulder was bothering him. The shoulder was bothering him early in the offseason also. So a heavy touch rate last year, heavy workload. And I know you're supposed to draft injury agnostic. I just feel like I got away with a completely healthy year of McCaffrey last year. I don't think lightning strikes twice for me this year. So I'm looking at other running backs for that. It's not that I hate Christian McCaffrey or anything like that. I'm just drafting this year based on what I expect to see, not what happened before.
I want to ask you, Team 9 takes Quinshon Judkins, that's Smoking Joe's, takes Quinshon Judkins in the 4th round. That is the highest he's gone. Do you like that pick? Judkins obviously had some really, really good weeks, but again, pretty major knee surgery. Granted, less severe knee injury than Cam Scadaboo suffered. But you're on the clock there at Team 9. You've taken Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, and Chris Olave. So you kind of bucked the current trend that we talked about earlier, gone heavy receiver. Do you take Quinshon Judkins, maybe this younger guy who has really explosive potential, but again, the injury recovery downside potential, and also a bad Browns offense? Or would you have maybe gone with someone more kind of we always talk about, the more all-reliable, where you're getting Kyren Williams, Josh Jacobs, David Montgomery. So what are your kind of thoughts on the Quinshon Judkins pick?
Yeah, I probably would have gone Kyren Williams there instead of Judkins, simply because, you saw the snap share. That's going to continue. Everybody sits there. They keep trying to elevate Blake Corum into this level, right? And all of a sudden you see Blake Corum with a 40% snap share. Look at the quality of touches for Blake Corum versus Kyren Williams. It's always been Kyren Williams. He's always been Sean McVay's lead back. Is that saying that McVay isn't going to utilize Corum every so often? You heard Mike LaFleur as the offensive coordinator for the Rams last year saying, I'm going to use Blake Corum more towards the end of the season so that I can keep Kyren Williams healthy for the playoffs, right? So there is that load management kind of feeling there, but that doesn't mean that Blake Corum is suddenly going to be this guy that, is going to take over the job. That's the biggest mistake that fantasy players make, is that they just assume that this guy is going to take over the job. And that's just not the case. There are far too many coordinators and coaches who prefer a multi-back system in their backfield, and the days of the bell cow back are not as prevalent as they are right now. So when you look at a guy like Kyren Williams and you see that snap share, what is it that's indicating that he's not going to see that same workload starting the season again this year? Why is Blake Corum suddenly going to get a bigger share of the workload? Why is he going to get a better quality set of touches? So I don't think that's the case. Judkins, Judkins versus Jacobs, that kind of is a little bit more of an even playing field, because you've got Jacobs, who's got much less tread on that tire, as opposed to Judkins, who's coming back from the injury. So I think those guys kind of level out a little bit more. I'm not going to be afraid to draft Quinshon Judkins, but like you said, Browns are going to be bad. They're not going to be running out the clock. The offensive line isn't what it used to be, but Quinshon Judkins is still probably going to be the guy who's going to see the majority of touches and quality touches in that offense.
Bashal Tutin is another running back that went in the 4th round. Another just incredibly trendy. Every fantasy player seems to love him. Obviously, the training reports came out this week, and it seemed as though it was a convoluted backfield. It was Tutin would be on. LaQuint Allen would get third down work. Chris Rodriguez was going to get the goal line touches, but that's not really impacting Tutin's ADP. He's still going in the middle of the 4th. or where are you at on everyone's favorite second-year running back, Bajal Tutin, and that Liam Cohen? Are you also thinking that some of this training camp report is smoke and he is going to get enough of a workload to justify a top 4-round pick?
I think he's definitely going to get enough of a workload. I mean, I think that, we just finally saw the changing of the guard there, right? It was Liam Cohen drafted Bajal Tutin, got rid of let Travis Etienne walk. I'm sorry, Etienne, or however else we want to pronounce that now.
Yes.
Right? And this is but he's got in Bajal Tutin, and Bajal Tutin, he just wants to make sure that this guy can pass block. Because we know that Tutin can catch passes, and we know that Tutin can run, inside zone. We know that he can run wide zone, that he's got some speed to be able to do that. So I think within Liam Cohen's system, I think Bajal Tutin is going to be absolutely fine. Will they spell in, some Chris Rodriguez? Yeah, sure. Are they going to have like some 3-headed monster where Rodriguez takes the short yardage work and LaQuint Allen takes all the passing downs and Bajal Tutin gets all the middle stuff? I don't think so. I think this will be majority of Bajal Tutin with a splash of the other two.
Howard, I got to ask you, now that both came off the board, obviously you were very high on Jameson Williams last year, and I think it was a reasonably placed expectation, although he had a good season, albeit pretty inconsistent, while Amon-Ra St. Brown produced. Between Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams, recognizing that there is almost a 4-round gulf in their draft position, with a new offensive coordinator, where do you make of the Lions receiving core this year? And obviously there's, Sam Laporta, if healthy, from the back. But specifically between Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams, where do you make with another offseason where Jameson Williams is receiving rave reviews from everyone on the coaching staff?
Yeah, and I'm just not going to buy it this year. I'm really not, especially just when you look at what Drew Petzing's system is. Right, because that's the thing also. I mean, we're looking at the Detroit Lions now, who are on their 3rd offensive coordinator in 3 years. John Morton was supposed to maintain most of what Ben Johnson did. That didn't happen. We saw that, right? And John Morton did with his offense what John Morton did with that offense. And that's one of the reasons why Jameson Williams was such a hard fail. Now you look at Drew Petzing and look at what Petzing's offense does. It definitely favors the tight end. So I can be bullish on Sam Laporta, that's for sure. Amon-Ra is going to get a ton of work, but if you look at what Petzing's offense does or did in Arizona, it was good for one receiver and a tight end to dominate in targets. It did not support the second wide receiver. So you could say Drew Petzing now in Detroit, it could favor both wide receivers, or it could favor one wide receiver and a tight end. Knowing the penchant, knowing the expectations of Sam Laporta in this offensive scheme, I think it stays one wide receiver and one tight end. And so I do worry about the target share that we are going to see from Jameson Williams. I just don't see him having, for this area of where he's going in drafts right now, right? I mean, just after Luther Burden, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, that's probably about fair. I don't necessarily know, though. I mean, if I look at this and I say I might want to favor Parker Washington, Mike Evans, and maybe even Roma Dunze over JMO.
Okay. On Mike Evans, obviously, Deshaun Stribling was one of the highest risers after the Ricky Pearsall out for the season news. Mike Evans, obviously, Pearsall's absence is not going to necessarily impact his playing time. But for all the buzz about Stribling, there's got to be some overlook in a way of Mike Evans and what he could provide for this Niners team, being maybe a Devontae Adams-like season like Devontae had last year, just a red zone monster for them. Mike Evans, with all the injuries to the receiving core, assuming kind of, as we said, injury agnostic, Mike Evans stays healthy, is he, going as wide receiver, what do we got here? I'm cut off. The late wide receiver 20s. A lot of smart people think Mike Evans is a really good value. Not the sexiest pick, but he's going to get the job done and produce, especially in the touchdown department. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I mean, I kind of do agree with that sentiment. I think that Mike Evans is going to be fine. They're bringing him in to play a very specific role, and that's the role that Brandon Ayuk had in this offense, and it is to be the big split end, right? It's going to be, he needs to, absorb the top coverage. His route tree is going to be more intermediary and downfield, as opposed to what if. But once you get into the red zone, because he's such a big target, he's going to see that work like Devontae Adams has. Devontae Adams, Mike Evans is a great comp, from there. You look at the other side of the field, Debo's going to end up being that gadget guy again, right? They're going to bring him in the slot, and Stribling will probably, since Pearsall's out now, he's got the opportunity to do more, to be more than just a field stretcher. But as it stands right now, he is just kind of like a field stretcher. And when you're looking at Kyle Shanahan and he's running 12 personnel, 21 personnel, 13 personnel, right? You only got 2 wide receivers on the field. And so who's going to be? Is it going to be Debo opposite Mike Evans, or is it going to be Stribling opposite Mike Evans? And then when you bring in the third receiver, you're going to bring in then Debo to play the slot? I don't think it's going to work like that. And I think that's another thing that I think a lot of fantasy owners are overlooking. They're overlooking the amount of big formations that offensive coordinators are looking at. A lot more offensive coordinators are using a fullback. A lot more offensive coordinators are using multi-tight end sets. And what that does is it takes away guys who traditionally just play the slot. They become less of a thing in fantasy because you're going to see so many 2 receiver sets that there is no guy coming out of the slot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fantastic point. Kind of 3 tight end, and it's there's many podcasts and articles out there breaking down how scheme changes, coordinator changes, impacting fantasy, and I'm sure as you would recommend to all people listening to really check those out, because those are as beneficial as any article, because that's truly what's going to impact some of these guys and some of their snap counts. I wanted to go into the early 5th round. A name that actually we haven't talked a lot about here on the show, but I ask you about, is there was some praise for the pick in the comments. DJ Moore traded to the Buffalo Bills. They expended some pretty good draft capital to acquire him from Chicago. Really down season with the Bears, very disappointing, and kind of wore out his welcome in the Windy City. But there's a lot to like there as Josh Allen's clear number 1 target. But we've also felt like we've heard this before when Amari Cooper came in midseason, when they drafted Keon Coleman. Feels like the Bills have just chugged along for all these years with Josh Allen being an elite quarterback where they never had a true alpha number 1. Can DJ Moore be that guy, or is he kind of going to settle into this bin of just quasi ones for the Bills, but it's just so spread out and run heavy? What do you make of DJ Moore now in a Joe Brady offense, reunited with Joe Brady in Buffalo?
Well, that's the thing. Reunited with Joe Brady, where he had one of the best seasons of his career, right? 93 catches in his second year with Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator in Carolina. I mean, listen, Buffalo is in dire need of an alpha receiver. They haven't had one since Diggs, really, right? Mm-hmm. Amari Cooper was kind of dealing more with his own injuries and his own shortcomings as a big split end wide receiver anyway. He wasn't really fitting into that mold. We didn't see him fit into it with with Buffalo. We didn't see him fit into it really with Cleveland. Now it's Cleveland, and we know it's just Cleveland. But yeah, I look at this as a great opportunity for DJ Moore, and I'll draft. Here's a veteran who I will draft on that upside notion that he and Josh Allen can click. Because DJ Moore's coming in here and he already knows the playbook. He already knows what Joe Brady is looking for, and he already knows what his job is supposed to be. And Joe Brady wants Josh Allen to get the ball out of his hands a little quicker and into the hands of his receivers, into his playmakers' hands, and let them add it yards after the catch. That's what Joe Brady wants to do. He loves those short, quick slants. He loves the underneath routes. And just pick up the yards after the catch. I think DJ Moore is flexible enough to be able to handle those routes, but he's also able to stretch the field vertically as well. So I think that I will draft DJ Moore on that, potential of him being the alpha receiver that Josh Allen desperately needs.
And I should clarify, I said that Josh Allen did not have an alpha receiver in his time being leading quarterback. I meant in the last couple of years since the departure of Stephon Diggs. But speaking of Stephon Diggs, This is our first draft that I've been doing, broadcasting live, since Stefon Diggs signed in Washington. Howard, where are you taking Stefon Diggs now that he has officially signed to play with Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, returning home to the home state of Maryland to play for the Washington Commanders? Where do you think Diggs goes in this draft?
I think I think you're looking at somewhere around I would say late 7th, early 8th is probably where you're going to start seeing Stefon Diggs go. It depends on, it depends on where you have him located in your draft room. That's another thing that obviously, it's like people come in, they'll be drafting all over their other site, and then they'll come into the FFPC and they'll, they won't have a good look at what the rankings are inside that draft room. And if you don't specifically look for Stefon Diggs and where he is on your draft board, then you kind of have to wonder. But I bumped him up in my rankings to, in that area of where I was looking at like a Josh Downs type player, right? A guy who has the potential to see really strong targets. He's not the dominant alpha of that team anymore, but he's talented enough that he's going to have a high enough floor for you to have. I don't necessarily know how explosive of a ceiling Stefon Diggs is really going to have at this point in his career, but I do think that he can be a guy who can be relied on 6, 7, 8 targets, maybe 5, 6, 7 catches. I mean, I think he's going to have the floor as opposed to the ceiling.
Okay. I want to go over Team 8, and specifically there are 2 selections of tight end through the first 6 rounds. They've gone Trey McBride in the second and then Tucker Kraft. Trey McBride, still a mid-round second pick, but, definitely some cool – people have cooled on him, obviously with the departure of Petzing, just kind of this concern about the quarterback play and just kind of the overall structure of the Cardinals and his impact on him kind of really widened that gap between him and Bowers. And the Tucker Kraft comes from ACL. He's out there saying it's the most amazing recovery the doctor's ever seen. But there's a lot to like from Tucker Kraft from what we saw last year healthy. I mean, was on pace to be one of the top tight ends in fantasy football. Those 2 names, talk to me, one, about your thoughts on McBride, Tucker Kraft, their ability to, produce maybe those top tight end in fantasy football this year. And if you could also kind of talk me through Team 8's build, kind of very interesting. The 2 tight ends, talked about J-Mo already, the only other receiver other than Justin Jefferson. So yeah, if you could talk me through McBride, Kraft, and then your thoughts on Team 8's build.
Yeah, so, listen, McBride, Mike LaFleur comes from McVay's scheme, and Mike LaFleur was one of the guys who was a big proponent of the 12 and the 13 personnel. He likes utilizing the tight end in that situation. So while I don't necessarily think that Trey McBride is going to see the target share that he's always seen, I think there's going to be a significant, still a good number of targets. Whether or not he's got that value in the second round anymore, that is unknown. And I've never been a fan, tight end premium or not, have never been a huge fan of taking the tight end in the first or the second round. Because what you're looking at here is that, the tight end needs to have like a top 5 all-time tight end performance for the season to justify that number, to have that kind of an impact on your team. Are Brock Bowers and Trey McBride going to be so far ahead of a guy like Sam Laporta or Kyle Pitts that it warrants skipping out on a top wide receiver or running back in order to grab that guy? And I think that's, kind of a very dicey situation. I think that, tight end premium has really pushed up, the value of tight ends because we chase this every year. We've been chasing it. When Travis Kelce was a top tight end and you're taking him in the first round, it was because he was well over 300 fantasy points. Tight end premium or not, he was well over 300 fantasy points. He was a top target on his team on the regular, and he was so far away ahead of everybody else. Now, last year, McBride was very much far away from every other tight end. The year before that, him and Bowers, no, they were in like the 260 to 280 point range. And so you really weren't getting the value that you wanted. So I'm perfectly fine waiting on the tight end. I'm not going to tell, I'm not going to say don't do it. It's going to ruin your draft, but I'm also not going to say that that's how I draft. And I won't do it that way. I also probably won't sit there and take Trey McBride and then take Tucker Kraft, a couple of rounds later than that. Because, again, how much of an advantage are you getting here? You're telling me that Tucker Kraft is going to be, in your flex? You'd rather flex Tucker Kraft than, a Devontae Adams or a Rico Dowdle or a Brian Thomas Jr. or a Marvin Harrison Jr.? You're telling me that you would rather flex Tucker Kraft? Are you going to get that significant of a bump here in tight end premium? I don't think you are. I mean, I think that you're going to be, you would be just fine with any other tight end or any other. I think you'd be better off with a player with a running back or a wide receiver with more upside than sitting there hoping that Tucker Kraft is coming back from his knee injury and them clearing out all the wide receivers is going to suddenly make room for him to see extra target work.
Howard, Team 10 is getting a bunch of positive buzz in the chat. They started off Jonathan Taylor and Kenneth Walker, followed up with Ladd McConkey, T. Higgins, Parker Washington, before taking their tight end and quarterback in Sam Laporta, Joe Burrow, and getting their third running back, another preseason darling, Jordan Mason. Talk me through. Are you with the chat that Team 10 is one of your favorites in this draft, or are you lower on?
I've been watching the back end of this draft just because I love the two running back start and where they're going with it. I think Ladd McConkey's got great potential here in Mike McDaniel's offense. Great potential here. But T. Higgins is always going to be T. Higgins. He's always going to be second fiddle to Jamar Chase. He's going to have his good weeks and he's going to have his bad weeks. Parker Washington, I think, has still a couple of question marks in there. Mm-hmm. I feel like Parker Washington will be the guy who gets the most targets as opposed to the number of touchdowns, right? He'll see good targets, but is he going to basically push Jacoby Myers out as a possession guy, or is he really going to be like the real deal? I love Laporta. I love Burrow. I love Mason. I don't think that his wide receivers, and I'll tell you what, I don't think his wide receivers or her wide receivers are as strong as the build from Team 2.
Okay.
Which is Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, who, listen, I've got my hangups with Achane also, just because if you're a defensive coordinator in the NFL and you're looking at Miami, what are you doing? You're putting a spy on Achane, you're putting a spy on Malik Willis, and you're trying to shut them down as much as possible. But Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Marvin Harrison Jr., and then you got Lamar Jackson there as well. I would take this build. Granted, they don't have a tight end, but I would take that build with those players over Team 10's.
Also, shout out the bulky team name. Gotta love that. Shout out Eric Balkman. Shout out Team 2 for that. Howard, Team 7, not going to talk about their build per se, because Josh Downs is their second receiver, which is interesting, saying that their first receiver is also dealing with an injury and hasn't practiced. But let's focus on Josh Downs. He's been rising up draft boards as Alec Pierce is injury continues to be a concern. Alec Pierce is not practicing. Sounds like the recovery is slow. The Colts seem to have no real receivers in that room outside of Pierce and Josh Downs. Downs injured his groin. It's not deemed serious. Seems like he'll be ready to go for week 1. Josh Downs, do you think that he's going to take advantage of Alec Pierce and then the Daniel Jones return? Or are you just kind of hesitant on kind of this whole Colts receiving core?
I mean, I'm fine with the Colts receiving core. I really am. I like Josh Downs. I like Josh Downs a lot. I'm very excited for Josh Downs in this role because you're supposed to have Alec Pierce on one side playing that split end role. You're going to have Josh Downs on the other side, right, who plays that slot flanker, right? So in a 2 receiver set, he's still going to be on the outside. In the 3 receiver set, you're going to move him into the slot. So I had big aspirations for Josh Downs for sure. Would I trust him now as my number 2? No, because even if you're losing Alec Pierce, who's gonna? Josh Downs isn't gonna take Alec Pierce's role. He's not gonna take his job. They're not gonna suddenly look at Josh Downs and be like, yeah, this guy can play big split end against some of the top corners out there. No, you can't you can't look at it in that same fashion. It's not necessarily like a next man up situation because they just play very different receiver roles. So I like Downs. I will happily draft Downs, but I mean, again, he's definitely not going to be my second wide receiver.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to have more receivers in the on the roster than that just to get Josh Downs. Again, the second tight end. I mean, how much are you going to really rip into a recovering George Kittle, who's going to play flex for you apparently for forever and ever?
Yeah, and also, I like to think when you take my personal belief is if you take Brock Bowers that early, that's just you have to ride it. I don't think it's worthwhile to send another bullet on an early tight end, let alone George Kittle, who is trending upwards. All credit to him, but I don't know if you can expect him to play a full season with any consistency off of that major injury. Interesting nonetheless. Question from the chat for you, Howard. Dennis Smith wants to know, would you take McCaffrey or Brock Bowers at the 107 in this FFPC main event tight end premium format?
I would probably take Christian McCaffrey over Brock Bowers.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you take a lot of people because Christian McCaffrey, right? You were saying was your running back.
I take a lot of people over Brock Bowers in the first round. Absolutely.
Okay.
Listen, again, I'm not 100% sure of what we're going to do with Brock Bowers. As it stands right now, they're lining him up all over the place. And I'm fine with that. Outside, big slot, at the tight end spot, whatever you want to do, go ahead. If you are going to make him a featured focus of your passing attack, then that's fantastic. But I need to see that before I start saying I'm going to take a tight end here over, an elite level wide receiver or an elite level running back. To me, again, I know the tight end position well enough that I can look at a guy like Pitts, like Laporta, like Isaiah Likely, and understand what their situations are, what their roles in their offense are going to be. And do I see Brock Bowers being 150 to 200 points greater than those guys? Not yet. So, yeah, there'd be a lot of guys I'd take over Brock Bowers.
Fair enough. And kind of following up on a previous discussion we had, Stefan
there
Diggs.
it is. Oh, sorry. Wait, there's that comment. That's the comment I love. Boomers are the best. Right? I mean, listen, I get it, right? Oh, man, just so old-fashioned way of looking at it and whatever. I'll tell you what, in all honesty, you might call it old-fashioned, but there's a reason that I've been winning money and tournaments and leagues over the last 20 years. You can say, boomer mentality. I've gone up and down with the times, and I've gone through a number of different things. And just because, some young kid comes in here with like some hot take on a great guy like Luther Burden doesn't necessarily mean that person understands the X's and O's of football. I pride myself on knowing the X's and O's of football, which has made me a better fantasy player. So if the young kids want to come at me, I'm fine with that. Set up the league, get the entrance fees together. Let's go. I'll go head to head with you if you want.
See, I love every appearance, your yearly appearance on these, because you're probably my only guest that I'll have, only expert who comes on and actually goes at it with the chat, and all love, right? I remember, I think it was now 3 years ago was your first time popping on, and I was wholly unprepared for you to someone said a similar comment, and you're going after, I'm like, oh man, I was at 11 now. Now I'm ready for it. You got to love those comments. And as Howard says, for anyone in the chat, Howard's in the draft rooms. He will gladly take anyone on in any format, any tournament here at FFPC. But back to the draft, Howard, I wanted to ask, Team 3 takes DeAndre Swift in the 4th round, follows it up in the 8th round by taking Kyle Monangai. Just kind of a general philosophy, general strategy. What are your thoughts on taking 2 running backs from the same team, let alone within the first 8 rounds of the draft?
Yeah, it's kind of tough doing it when the guys are so close together. It's one of the reasons why I hate the whole Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks thing. Mm-hmm. What I like about what's going on in Chicago here is that both those guys do have standalone value, right? Like, people seem to forget Ben Johnson runs a run-first scheme. And Ben Johnson loves having that tandem running backs. He's the guy who brought you the Sonic and Knuckles in Detroit. He's the one who did that. And you look at, last year, yes, did David Montgomery get phased out and Gibbs had more? Sure, that is what John Morton did. But if you look and see what was going on in Chicago last year, there was a very nice little split there between the two. And I think that they're going to continue to maintain that, where DeAndre Swift does a lot more of the outside zone work, more the wide zone work. If they're going to do, pin and pull as far as their blocking scheme goes, you're going to see DeAndre Swift doing the outside stuff. He's going to be doing the pass catching stuff. Monanga is going to get a lot of inside zone work, but they mix it up so much that I do think that both these guys have enough standalone value that you can draft both of them. And then on top of that, just assume, you don't want to assume, but if one of them does get hurt, the other one is going to see the increased role.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you mentioned them, and I kind of getting the sense that maybe the answer is just not a clear-cut answer, but your thoughts on Jonathan Brooks and Chuba Hubbard. In this draft, Brooks goes as RB27, Chuba RB29. I think it's really been a toss-up on who people prefer. I personally tend to lead that Brooks maybe starts the year off slow, they ease him back in, but by the end of the year, he's the one getting the workload. It's a different type of knee surgery than he had, not typical for someone, not as concerning, I should say, as someone who had 2 tears. It was a little bit different. It was re-strengthening, and I suppose he looks good. Chuba didn't have a great year, but kind of been intrigued to see your thoughts, because I feel like, in theory, if you get that right, that's a potential mid-round league winner if you hit it right between Chuba and Jonathan Brooks in that run-heavy Carolina offense.
Well, that's the thing also, because, I need to see what Jonathan Brooks is going to do, right? I need to – dude hasn't been on the field in 2 years. I need to see what he looks like in a competitive game. I need to see what he looks like taking hits in the backfield. I want to see what he looks like when somebody tackles him low and drags him down. I need to see that from him. Otherwise, I'm just going to continue to defer to Chuba Hubbard being the primary back. Dave Canales likes using one running back. He doesn't necessarily need the tandem backfield, and we've seen that with him, right? Dave Canales was like that in Tampa Bay when he was over there, and he did it with Chuba Hubbard his first year. Now, Chuba got hurt last year at probably the worst time you could ever get hurt, right? Because you got hurt when your backup was going to face the worst run defense in the NFL, and then follow that game up with the second worst run defense in the NFL, who also happened to be a team that cut you, and you want to exact a little bit of revenge.
Yeah.
So what's Canales going to do after Dowdle rushes for over 200 yards in back-to-back games, and he looks great? You don't want to, if you're going to ride the hot hand, then you ride the hot hand. But what we saw was he still had a little bit of a role for Chuba Hubbard as the season went on. And then towards the tail end of the season, when Rico Dowdle started to fade, because he wasn't used to that kind of a workload either, you started seeing Chuba Hubbard getting more work. So I'm going to go into this season here believing that Chuba Hubbard has the job, and Jonathan Brooks really needs to show out in training camp and in the preseason to even remotely take that job.
Very interesting. Comment in the chat about Keaton Mitchell, comparing him to Devon Achane. I'm trying to find it. Yes, Achane or Keaton Mitchell at ADP. I'm not leaving a draft without Mitchell. We kind of mentioned Achane earlier, but I want to talk about Keaton Mitchell. He just goes off the board at the 10:07. You seem like you're, and when we discussed Lad, a big believer in what Mike McDaniel's going to do there in LA. Is that gonna trickle down to Keaton Mitchell, or is he going to be a guy in a managed league format like the main event, not best ball? Is Keaton Mitchell a tough click because of potential spike weeks, but also just inconsistency? What do you make of Keaton Mitchell?
I think that we're going to have a problem with consistency from Keaton Mitchell. I'm not, I think as it stands right now, Omarion Hampton is the lead guy, but just like we saw Mike McDaniel do in Miami, right? He had Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. And he utilized Mostert to maximum capacity, right? I mean, Mostert had 20 touchdowns that season?
Yeah, crazy,
right? Everyone's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it!" But yet, still, both backs ate. Mm-hmm. Both backs were productive. Both backs were strong fantasy assets. It just so happened that the people who got the value out of Raheem Mostert, because he was being drafted much, much later, it had a bigger impact on their roster. I'm not saying that Keaton Mitchell is going to get like half the workload here. I think Mike McDaniel wants to give it all to Omari and Hampton, but he's not going to be stupid about it. And he's going to understand that he's going to run different plays. You know, he does like using wide zone, which stretches out the field horizontally, right? And it stretches out the defense. And what happens is that Keaton Mitchell can run to the sidelines. And if he can beat the edge rusher, then he zips up field on the sidelines. If he realizes that he's not going to beat the rusher over to the edge, then he cuts back. And he's got the room to do that. And I think we're going to see Keaton Mitchell do a bunch of that. I just don't think – I think we're blowing up Keaton Mitchell kind of like some people are blowing up Blake Corum. They're elevating him too much, and they're giving him way too much credit that he's going to be – like, you know, chewing up that many touches there for Hampton.
Question in the chat here from Corey Walters. I mean, a little bit early, I will say, to be asking this, but, you know, I'm a man of the people. Howard, who is the number 2 running back to own in Green Bay? And a somewhat, you know, legitimate question with some off-the-field issues lingering over Josh Jacobs, likely not going to be resolved this year. But also Jacobs banged up last year. And the Packers have an intriguing run game if Jacobs ever does go down. So if you're drafting, what Packers backup running back are you most targeting?
I mean, if he's going to stay healthy, I'll draft Marshawn Lloyd. But, I mean, that dude has just been an absolute nightmare. I think if Josh Jacobs were to go down, I think that we would have to see LaFleur turn to more of a tandem backfield. I think he can get away with a lot with Josh Jacobs in his role. Jacobs is a decent pass blocker. I think if you're going down to like Chris Brooks, Pierre Strong, I think you'll see a shared role. I even think that if Marshawn Lloyd is there, you might still see, you know, a little bit more of a, you know, some versatility out there on third down, as opposed to it being one guy. So if I'm sitting there drafting right now, if I have Josh Jacobs, I will, you know, I'll draft Marshawn Lloyd as the handcuff. I won't dive deeper than that.
Mekhi Lemon goes here in the 10th round. He still hasn't practiced. Devontae Smith hasn't practiced. Whole new offensive scheme in Philadelphia. I think they're one of the most intriguing teams in terms of kind of make or break fantasy this year. And, you know, whether Saquon and Jalen Hurts can rebound under this new system, if the offensive line can improve, and then how the receiving core shapes up, whether Devontae Smith can really elevate into that wide receiver 1 role. And then what Mekhi Lemon's rookie year role is. But with all the injury concerns, talk me through your thoughts on the Eagles with Sean Mannion now as their offensive coordinator.
I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult than they think to replace A.J. Brown.
Mm-hmm.
I do. Because you look at the role that he played versus, you know, what Devontae Smith's role was. And Devontae Smith, you know, listen, he can play the outside. He can play in the slot. You know, he hasn't been in that situation or not been in that situation often enough where he's drawing the top coverage, right? And he's not, you know, so I mean, I think that, you know, when you're looking at, you know, from an Eagles standpoint here, I think the person who suffers the most is Mekhi Lemon right now. Because I think Devontae Smith they're going to try to utilize him as their number 1. He's going to play a fantastic snap share. He's going to get plenty of work. He's going to see plenty of targets. But if you're looking for somebody who's going to be able to be that big split end and replace A.J. Brown, then you might have to actually look at Dontavian Wicks or Hollywood Brown. I don't like either of them in that situation there, but the problem is that Mekhi Lemon isn't that guy either. And, you know, Mekhi Lemon, he's a great route runner, and you know, we can probably rely on him in that slot flanker role, but are they going to move Devontae Smith into that big split end role? And if he struggles, even in the beginning, right? Because remember we saw Emeka Egbuka last year, right? When Mike Evans was on the field and Chris Godwin was hurt, Egbuka was fantastic, right? He played that Chris Godwin role, that slot flanker role. Then Godwin was back. Mike Evans got hurt, and Egbuka moved over to that big split end role, and he struggled tremendously. And I think a lot of people, you know, I mean, think about it. How great was Egbuka for the first 5 weeks of the season, and then where did he go for the next 5 weeks? So I think that that's something that you kind of have to pay attention to as to which receiver is playing which role. So I do think that Devontae Smith, I love the guy and I'll draft the guy all day long, but I do worry that the Eagles might not have the right components to play opposite him.
Definitely. I think it was Coop said on our show he has just worries about skinny Batman, as he called him, and his ability to step into that Batman role, or if he was better suited as a Robin. Sean Green in the chat said that he loves the QB range in this kind of 9th round through this 11th round. Really interesting to kind of chart the QB position. We've talked about it pretty extensively, but I like kind of asking each guest because there's a different take on it. We obviously see Josh Allen go in this draft in round 3. He's kind of going in that middle 3rd, sometimes slips into the 4th round. And then there's a big wait until quarterback. Then you see the next tier, the Drake Mays, the Joe Burrows, the Lamars. And then after that, it's just a real dealer's choice of who kind of goes as QB5. Like we've seen Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels in this draft, Herbert, Hurts. It's truly all over the place. How are you attacking the quarterback position when you're in drafts this year, Howard?
I've kind of mixed it up a little bit here, right? Like I don't have any Josh Allen. I'm never the first guy to take a QB off the board, especially if I'm going to get a 2 or 3 round discount to take Lamar Jackson or Drake May. Those two guys I've definitely grabbed a bunch of as well. I've grabbed a little Joe Burrow. I actually just drafted Jaden Daniels this year for the first time in a slow draft that I just am doing right now. I love this range as well. Justin Herbert, Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence. I don't mind Dak Prescott. I think that he is a perfectly fine guy to use. I know that everybody wants their mobile upside QBs. I'll take my mobility with a guy like Drake May or Lamar Jackson. I'm happy to take a guy who's more of a, who's mobile but not necessarily a rushing quarterback like Herbert or Lawrence. I'm happy to grab those guys there as well. And then maybe pair them up later on with a quarterback who does some things a little bit differently. Like I'll grab a guy like Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence, and then I'll use another pick on like Kyler Murray, right? Or if I'm going to take a guy like Drake May or Lamar Jackson, then maybe further down, maybe I'm looking for more like a Matthew Stafford or Jared Goff as my backup QB.
And I will say, you kind of mentioned Trevor Lawrence. An interesting stat is, I forget where he ranks, but I know for sure he's like over the last couple of years, he's top 3 in quarterback rushing touchdowns, which you just wouldn't expect. But he'll scramble in that red zone, and especially with kind of the promise of the Jaguars offense that we're seeing, Lawrence and his kind of underrated wheels that he has, I think is definitely an interesting quarterback name in this range. Howard, I want to ask you. It's crazy every time for me to see a kicker go in round 11 and not make fun of it, just to be blunt. Brandon Aubrey is a weapon. At the same time, Brandon Aubrey wasn't even the number 1 kicker last year. It was Jason Myers. You're in an FFPC main event draft. Do you consider Brandon Aubrey at all, or is it still you're waiting on kicker?
Typically, I'm waiting on kicker. It's kind of funny. The question is and I can't remember, is the score. There's so many formats. Are you getting points for longer field goals? Because if you're getting points for longer field goals, then it makes sense to take a guy like a Brandon Aubrey, right? I mean, I'm not necessarily going to be the guy who's going to grab him, and there's a good note right there that it was a week 14 bye. Nobody wants that in their playoff time, do they? That's the worst part about this Dallas stack that so many people are still investing in. It's like, what are you doing in week 14? If I'm going to get distance points for longer field goals, then I'm okay taking a guy like Aubrey. I'm not going to take him in the 11th round. I mean, maybe, 12th round, 13th. What? How many rounds are we going here? 20?
20 rounds.
Yeah, see, I'd rather take like a Cam Little in round 16 or 17, who I know he's got a big leg, and I know the Jags are going to score some points. So I think I'd rather just do that than just turn around and say, well, Aubrey's going to be that guy also. Because I think both of them have the potential of being that guy. Aubrey's just done it more.
And again, we talked about the Niners. We talked about Deshaun Stribling earlier. Deshaun Stribling goes at the 12:03. I know we have some Niners fans in the chat. It's getting a little high, and especially because that ADP, I think Howard, we could see Stribling pushing the 10th round especially if he has some big preseason games. So I just did want to point that out. In round 12, as someone pointed out, round 12 is when they feel that wild card time really begins, which is the truth. Oronde Gadsden had a fantastic rookie season, came out of not nowhere. There was a lot of people on him out of Syracuse, but really for the more casual fantasy player, did come out of nowhere, had some big weeks. He gets this elite offensive coordinator in Mike McDaniel. We've seen the bump for Marion Hampton. We've seen the buzz for Ladd. There's people who love Quentin Johnston. They signed David Njoku, but Gadsden is not getting the buzz, partly because of the Njoku signing, partly because there's a bunch of targets to go around. But do you think Gadsden is underrated to a degree? He's going as tight end 19 in this draft. This is a guy who we've seen can be an elite receiving tight end, and he's paired in this high-powered, explosive offense. Are you surprised that he goes so low, or does it make sense with everything going on in LA?
No, it doesn't surprise me that he goes this low. It was the signing of Njoku. Now, there was a video that's floating around the interwebs right now. You can find it at RotoBuzzGuy on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. You could probably find it as the real RotoBuzzGuy on TikTok if you want. If I can just plug my socials there.
Absolutely.
Right? Talking about how excited I was for Oronde Gadsden. It was right after the draft. And I had it in my head. I was very nervous about what the Chargers were going to do in the draft, right? They were linked to Kenyon Sadiq. You started seeing a number of, tight ends being drafted earlier and earlier. And I was like, oh man, I don't really want this because Gadsden was a 5th round commodity. And, if you can find, if an NFL GM is going to find somebody in the 2nd round at the tight end position that they like more, that's probably the guy who's going to get that lean over, a guy like, like Gadsden. But then they didn't bring anybody in. And I was like, Gadsden to the moon. Mike McDaniel's offense. They signed Charlie Kohler to be that, blocking inline tight end.
Yep.
Right? And it's all over it. And then all of a sudden they signed David Njoku. And I was like, damn it. So, I've taken Gadsden because his price is so low right now.
Yeah.
I think he's got one of the best abilities to really bust out and give you tremendous value on where you drafted him. Mm-hmm. It's going to take a little bit of a leap of faith to draft him. This is a great situation for team 11 to do
really good draft.
Yeah, really good draft. But to take Pitts first and then turn around and Gadsden's your backup, I think you're in a nice spot here. I like everything about this draft except for this, this interesting Tampa Bay stack that they've got going.
Yeah, they have the Tampa Bay, the Egbuka, Kenny Gainwell, and Godwin. I didn't mind it. Some people in the chat were saying they didn't love going Purdy almost immediately after taking Caleb Williams. I don't hate that.
No,
as much, but I think, as you said, going Gadsden after a pitch is great, and I think Gadsden is going to emerge as I might even say top 10 tight end this year. I see that well in his range of possibilities, more than people are giving him credit for. We saw what McDaniel did even with Darren Waller last year, and Jonnu Smith had a career year under Mike McDaniel. I'm going to buy Gadsden, his receiving talent, and Mike McDaniel's ability to get the most out of that offense, a really good value at the tight end position. Howard, you had kind of mentioned hesitancy with Jackson Dart. Team 5, did they do it right? They took Jackson Dart in round 11, 10th overall QB, followed it up, though, with Matthew Stafford, the NFL leader in passing touchdowns last year. That's kind of how you would do it if you're taking Jackson Dart, I assume?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, with Jackson Dart, you're not drafting Jackson Dart because you think he's going to have, 300-yard passing games, right? You're looking at Jackson Dart, and you're drafting Jackson Dart because this guy is going to run 85 times this season. And giving you that kind of a I talk Jackson Dart, and my dogs get all riled up on it. They're Giants fans. I think you're getting him because of that rushing upside. If you can get 200 yards and a touchdown out of Jackson Dart through the air, then kind of what you're banking on here is that you're also going to get 50 to 60 yards on the ground and another rushing touchdown. So if that's what you're banking on for that, okay, great. You can, mix and match depending on what defense he's going to be facing. But then, yeah, you've got a veteran pocket passer in Matthew Stafford who's got elite level weapons still. And, maybe he doesn't, maybe he has some struggles here and there. But overall, that the Rams are setting him up for success. So it's a good, stable backup QB to have.
And the thing with Stafford is, for all that people are rightfully talking about the regression, he put up some unreal stats that are just not going to continue. It's not feasible, let alone the defense is much improved. They may be in less shootouts. That's kind of baked into his price. We're seeing the defending, reigning, I should say, MVP, passing touchdown leader. He's going at QB 15. It's not like we're drafting him as a top 10 quarterback. Round 13, I think all the concern about the regression, that's already factored into the price point. Yeah. Jackson Dart, I'll say I am a believer entirely in best ball. We were talking about know your format, because the injury risk I think is real. You mentioned it with CMC, which I agree with you entirely. We have to address injury agnostic, but you can suspend that for some players. Jackson Dart and his play style is one of them. Now, could he have a Josh Allen trajectory and kind of tone it down and know how to protect himself? Yes. Is he a young player? And I saw no chance of that happening last year, no improvement in the season, despite multiple concussions, multiple injuries. That concerns me a bit in a redraft managed format with Jackson Dart, but the upside is immense there for him. Howard, Kenyon Sadiq drops. He goes 14th round, understandably. Questions about whether he'll be ready to start the season with a hernia. But the Jets' offenses as a whole, what I want to get to, they added Sadiq, they added Omar Cooper. Frank Reich is their new offensive coordinator. Obviously, as you said, you pride yourself on the X's and O's. What is Frank Reich bringing to the Jets? Who does that benefit? Or is Frank Reich a concern, as I kind of have? And Frank Reich maybe is not going to improve this offense, although the bar is very low for improvement. Where's
your chat screaming boomer now, right? I mean, listen, I'm a diehard Jets fan. I've been born and raised a Jets fan, as for better or for worse.
My prayers.
I think it's atrocious having Frank Reich in there, right? I think it's, why are we not, bringing in a coordinator from this century? Like, it just kills me at this point here. I think that, again, my prediction for the Jets is that I think the Jets have a week 12 bye, so it might get stretched out almost till week 12, but I could see sometime around week 8, week 9, the Jets are faltering, they're struggling, boom, fire Aaron Glenn, move Frank Reich into the interim head coach, let him finish the season, and then next year when you are taking all that tasty draft capital that you have in the first round, you're going to get your quarterback and you're going to hire a new coach and just revamp the system there.
Hello, Declan Doyle. Welcome to New York. Get Declan Doyle to New York, or some young promising.
Right, I'll take Bobby Slowick. Just give me Bobby Slowick from down in Miami. I'm fine.
I don't know about that, Howard.
Sam McDaniels Shanahan tree scheme. I'm fine with that.
Bobby Slowick would not work in New York. I understand the system, but he's not a great OC. But Declan Doyle, we'll go Declan Doyle for the Jets.
Declan Doyle would be fantastic, but if Declan Doyle, if they turn around and they say to Declan Doyle, you're the head coach, sure. My concern also, though, is that if you're a first-time head coach, should you really also be your offensive coordinator and calling the plays too? I mean, you've got to bring in somebody.
Did Ben Johnson call plays for Chicago last year?
Ben Johnson called the plays for Chicago last year. It was not Declan Doyle.
He was a first-year play caller. So, first-year head coach, but Ben Johnson probably is the exception to the norm, I would say.
I mean, he had Declan Doyle. If Declan Doyle's got next year's Declan Doyle as his offensive coordinator, yes, I will happily take that. Just give me anything. The Jets haven't had anything going on.
John David, Terp's foil. Howard, you had your foil with that. John David is Terp's foil with consistency. Terp is at a wedding. He's probably 8 high noons deep at this point. Hence why we decided that it's for the best to not join the show. But he will be back on the I believe August 18th. We're covering a best ball tournament draft. So, Howard, let's get back to this draft here. We've sung the praises of Clint Kubiak in regards to Ashton Genty. Talked about him with Brock Bowers. What about Clint Kubiak in relation to that, granted, underwhelming on paper receiving core? Jalen Naylor, Trey Tucker. I believe that there's going to be fantasy relevance in this Las Vegas receiving core due to Clint Kubiak. Which Las Vegas receiver are you most targeting, if any, because of Clint Kubiak?
I mean, you kind of have to look at it and think that, that Trey Tucker is going to have, a decent role in this offense. I mean, I don't love any of the receivers. I think Trey Tucker is probably going to be your leading target getter, but
I mean, we could see 100+ targets for Trey Tucker.
What's that?
We're probably going to see 100+ targets for Trey Tucker.
You definitely could. I think you're going to end up seeing, you're going to see more than you expected from Jalen Naylor, right? I think that's something that, people kind of forget, that one of the things that you do need to do in the NFL is follow the money, right? Yep. And they paid Jalen Naylor, and Jalen Naylor worked with Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, right? They had some crossover there. It wasn't phenomenal, but they had some crossover there, and I think that they're going to utilize Naylor as like that security blanket, right? You want Bowers to be the first look, but I think Naylor doing a lot of slot work is going to end up seeing a significant number of targets. I'm not really I'm investing in Naylor because it's like a free pick in like the 13th or 14th
round.
Yeah, it's like a free pick there. Trey Tucker's a free pick in the 16th round if you really want to. Nobody's touching him. So yeah, I mean, the problem is I've always got so much Ashton Genty that I don't even worry about any of those wide receivers.
Fair enough. Very fair enough. Howard, I want to ask you, and your friend, our friend, Andrew Cooper, often says, and I love it, if you're a believer of something, let's say you're fading someone, in this case, let's say Christian McCaffrey, you have to also think, if you're going to go that route, what is the impact? If you think Christian McCaffrey is going to have a down season, get hurt, who is going to benefit from that? Team 6 drafted Christian McCaffrey at the 106. They follow up with taking Kalen Black. I know you had said you are kind of, taking your chips with the healthy Christian McCaffrey season, taking it to the bank. You're kind of passing on him this year. Do you see a Kalen Black, a Jordan James as a benefit from a potentially down season where he might get less touches, where there's a heightened injury risk?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a handcuffing guy. I really am. Boomer mentality. Not every situation has a proper handcuff, but in this case here, I do think, I do like Kalen Black. I think that I like Black a little bit more than I like Jordan James. Not a lot, but I think that they're definitely they're very similar guys. That I think that Kalen Black, because I think both of them are banged up right now, but I think James has got the more severe injury. Taking a guy like Kalen Black, to me, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, what are you doing in your final rounds of your draft anyway, right? Are you going to handcuff your guy because you believe in the system, right? Or are you going to, look for a guy like Kalen Black, who I think is a great opportunity, almost like what's his name, Claiborne from Minnesota, right? Claiborne's he's an Aaron Jones injury away from seeing touches and targets. And so that's what I'm looking at when I'm looking at these later rounds. Kalen Black is a guy who is a Christian McCaffrey injury away from getting that work. Will Jordan James pop in? We'll have to just kind of wait and see who's healthier. That's really kind of where it's going to be at, because we've seen what Shanahan's scheme does, right? I mean, we saw it. McCaffrey went down and it was Garendo, and Garendo went down and it was Breida, and however they want to do it in that fashion. So I love looking for some of these guys who at the end of the draft, you're looking at and you're like, this guy's like an injury away. Black, Claiborne, Isaac Tesla, the wide receiver in Detroit. Like, that's another one. If J-Mo goes down or Amon-Ra St. Brown goes down, who's going to step up into that role? So I do like looking at some of these late guys, the Nick Singleton, the Jordan James. Brian Robinson, I think, is a great call there to back up Bijan.
And I will say also, again, you're playing in the main event. you can drop these people. Like, if that a injury doesn't open up time for some of these guys, they don't hog a space on your bench. You can cut them with ease. And then, if depending on how you manage your fab, if something does happen, you'll have the ability to pick them up, which I think is, as you said, the benefit to drafting them with the kind of this free ticket to kind of see through the first couple of weeks how things shape out. And I will say, Sean Green was in the chat saying that if CMC goes down, it's likely going to be a split. But, we've seen Shanahan fall in love with one running back and ride them, no matter when they were drafted or where they were drafted from. The Matt Breidas, the Isaac Guerendos of the world. So it's almost certainly Jordan Mason. It's certainly something to watch because so many people seem to be hesitant on CMC. There's going to be a adverse effect of your fate of him if you're correct, that someone in that San Francisco offense is going to benefit. You mentioned Nick Singleton. I would like to hear a little about him because I was high on both of those Penn State running backs as sleepers. They didn't necessarily land in the best situation, but I kind of want to hear your thoughts on Nick Singleton in Tennessee, but then also your broader thoughts on what Brian Daboll is going to bring to Tennessee and whether you are buying the improvements from Cam Ward now that he has Wan'Dale Robinson, Carnell Tate in his receiving core. What do you make of the Tennessee offense? And then, as I said, if you could give me a little on a late-round sleeper, Nick Singleton out of Penn State.
I mean, I think Nick Singleton is a guy who should be viewed as I think he's the handcuff to Tony Pollard. I don't think Tajay Spears is. How many years have we been waiting for Tajay Spears to do something? Right? There's that gif that everybody's like poking it with the stick, being like, do something. Tajay Spears has never been that guy. So I think that does open things up for Singleton. He's also a little bit bigger, right? He's like 6 foot, right? He's a little bit more upright. And I dig Singleton a little bit more than I like Tajay Spears. I like what Brian Daboll's putting together here in Tennessee. You can't argue and say that Brian Daboll is not successful with quarterbacks. You can't say that, right? You look at the work that he did with Josh Allen, for crying out loud, right? You're going to tell me that, he had no influence there whatsoever on the situation. He helped Jackson Dart tremendously. He was so overprotective of Jackson Dart last year. So I think what we're seeing here is, Cam Ward was a fairly accurate passer last year. It wasn't like, his completion rate was, horrendous. But I think when you give him this security blanket that is Wan'Dale Robinson now, I think that's something that's going to be huge for the underneath work. And I think we're going to see him. That's going to enable them to take more chances downfield, hitting Carnell Tate. So I look at this offense. I think Tony Pollard is incredibly underrated because it's not just because he came off strong in the last couple of games last season. It's just that I don't really see an immediate competition for touches for him in the backfield, and I think that he will be utilized as the primary back. Tate, I'm fine taking with him, and I'm fine grabbing I love grabbing Wan'Dale Robinson. It's like the least sexy pick possible, right? Everybody who was like slobbering all over Khalil Shakir 3 years ago should be slobbering all over Wan'Dale Robinson right now. Great high floor option, and I think that's fine. But that's it. Like I'm not into Gunnar Helm as my tight end. I don't think that's going to be a huge thing either. I think that's really, you're looking at the 2 wide receivers and the 1 running back, and that's probably where the bulk of your fantasy production comes from.
Howard, before the show, we were talking about one Cyrus Allen, the preseason darling, because like every year we have a Chiefs late round undrafted receiver who becomes the talk of the fantasy community. Cyrus Allen is this year's entry. Will he be the first one to actually deliver on the preseason promise, or is it just another name that we're going to be talking about in a couple of years? Like, remember the Cyrus Allen buzz of 2026?
Maybe, right? I mean, just coming off fresh of that Ted Hurst buzz that was coming up post-draft as well. Yeah. Right? That was the other one that was going to be a huge thing. I mean, listen, I think that Cyrus Allen has as much potential as anybody else to thrive in this scheme. It's really just a matter of whether or not he builds that rapport with Travis Kelce. With Patrick Mahomes. Right?
Building his rapport with Travis Kelce would be certainly the Chiefs' season has.
With Travis Kelce would be interesting, but
yeah,
I mean, listen,
the Chiefs' season has taken a turn.
Xavier Worthy hasn't done it, right? And he's dealing with a shoulder problem.
Again,
we could all look to Tyquan Thornton, right? I mean, downfield threat. And then there's, I think people have given up on Jalen Royals, unless, of course, you're talking about, anybody who was, a big fan of him when he was in college. And then
someone out there, there's one person probably still defending that castle, waving the Jalen Royals
absolutely.
flag.
Absolutely. That's like, anybody who went to Utah State will tell you. Anybody who's watching a lot of whack football back in the day is going to tell you about, like, how great they are. It's like, again, it's like the Corey Davis truthers. Anybody who ever went to Central Michigan will tell you Corey Davis is the greatest wide receiver to ever play the game. Dude couldn't cut it in the NFL. So
row the boat. PJ Fleck's Western Michigan team was a squad. It was a squad though. But Corey Davis.
But I think you take these guys for what they are. They're shots in the dark. They're a guy you draft in the last round. And if you need a roster spot because of injury, then you cut them. You look and see what they do, right? What's their snap share? What are the coaches saying about them? What's the workload that they're doing, right? I mean, we've gone through so many of these types of players, right? If the moment they tell me that Cyrus Allen is working with the punt team, I'm out.
That's a fair way to do it. Another preseason rookie receiver darling, and one that I think actually has maybe a little more backing, is Jacoby Lane is making insane play after insane play at Ravens minicamp and preseason training. He was a third-round pick, so not the undrafted capital. He was overshadowed by Mekhi Lemon, but Jacoby Lane had a sensational season at USC. Zay Flowers just got paid, but they've been searching for a number 2 for Lamar Jackson to pair with Zay and then Mark Andrews in that tight end room for a while. Jacoby Lane is kind of asserting himself as maybe he can be that guy. Surprising to me to see Cyrus Allen go above him in this draft, but Jacoby Lane is someone who I think is going to keep rising in drafts, and deservingly so. Are you kind of in the same boat where you're buying this Jacoby Lane buzz, especially as we said, 17th round? It's a lottery ticket.
It's a lottery ticket, like anything else, right? And the fact that he's kind of got the edge over Elijah Surratt in camp right now is something to pay attention to for sure. Like you said, these are going to be the dart throws that you're going to make, and you're going to just kind of see what happens. Wouldn't it just be the worst thing in the world for Baltimore if it was still Rashad Bateman, right? I mean, I think
it's not talked about enough. Like jokes, it's truly not, right? That he might be a fit in Doyle's scheme, and a good fit at that.
Absolutely.
I don't think he's not that old either. Like he was way younger.
Not the sexy name. He's not the sexy name. He's not the guy who, people
26 years old. He was born in 90. 26. It's not old at all. He can break out. Like I'm not
kidding. In the last round. You know what I mean? For so many best ball drafts that I've done already, it's like Rashad Bateman in the last round, Deshaun Watson in the last round, right? I mean, there've just been so much great value drafting super early this year, but now we're starting to see it. Now here we are in August, and all the talking heads are getting their fix in here, and every analyst and wannabe analyst is out here, touting their favorite guys, and whether they pan out or not, it's always the best. This is always the best time to hear all the talking, right? Because it gets so quiet in December, so quiet.
You're not wrong about that. Jadarian Price goes to Team 7 in the 6th round. They followed up to take George Holani, another kind of 2 running backs from the same fit. George Holani had some early buzz, which was always a little surprising to me as a undrafted guy who had like 30-something career carries to his name compared to the explosive first-round pick. What do you make of the Seattle backfield? Are we going to look back in 2027 as Jadarian Price was a great value in the 6th round? Or are we maybe concerned that he's going to be eased into his role in the NFL, or just some general concerns about whether he was even worth that first-round pick with his more limited role due to Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame. I kind of want your thoughts on the Seattle backfield.
Worth the first-round pick? I'm not 100% sure. I mean, it was super late in the first round.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he was like drafted in the top 15 or something like that. First pick in dynasty drafts, yeah, it's still also a little suspect for me right now also. Because, I mean, I think that we are looking at very strong shared backfield situation, right? Just because of, listen, Brian Fleury, he's going to bring Shanahan's offense with him. He's probably going to rotate some running backs in there. He's waiting to see what happens with Zach Charbonnet. What I like about Price right now, and I don't think the 6th round is an outlandish spot to take him. I wouldn't push him up further. Mm-hmm. I remember, in drafts back in April and May, people were looking at him in like the 4th round. 6th round I'm okay with, just simply because we don't know what's going to happen with Zach Charbonnet and his recovery. George Halani isn't like the be-all, end-all. And what are we doing with Emmanuel Wilson? Have we even – I don't even know if he's in camp. It's been so quiet about Emmanuel Wilson. So I think Jadarian Price has the greatest opportunity to put himself into a better spot. They're saying, here you go, let's see what you can do. And if he does, outplay or outperform the guys who are in camp, he's going to get the work. He's going to get the work, at least until Zach Charbonnet shows up and he starts getting, his share of the work.
Just keeping on the Seahawks, I meant to ask you this earlier. Does Brian Fleury's addition as OC concern you with JSN? Obviously, again, for all we talk about Stafford, JSN seems to also have some maybe stats that just almost impossible to replicate. His target share, kind of how he was lined up, Sam Darnold potential regression. Are you buying? Not buying, I should say. JSN's been going usually as wide receiver 3 or 4 in FFPC drafts. There's a lot of smart people who think that might be too high, despite the insane season he had last year. Are you lower on JSN? I'd be intrigued to hear.
Man, I'm not really lower on JSN. I'm kind of like right there in the middle with him. I think he's fine where he's going. If I'm drafting in the late part of the draft and he's available to me there, I'll definitely give him a look. The good thing is that, Brian Fleury comes from Shanahan, from the San Francisco 49ers, which is basically where Sam Darnold learned to play football.
Yes.
Right? He didn't learn it with the Jets, and he didn't learn it at USC. He learned it when he was working with the 49ers, and he was fantastic with the 49ers. And he came in and he served as their starting quarterback for a short period of time, and he looked fine. Then he goes over to Minnesota, and he takes everything that he learned there, and he dominates in Kevin O'Connell's scheme. Then he comes back over, and he's in Kubiak's system, and I think that he was a great QB and knew how to lean on JSN when he needed to lean on JSN. It was more of a run heavy scheme in Seattle, which helped take the pressure off of him to be this like dominating presence. When you're in Minnesota, right, you have to be that dominating presence of a QB. When you're in Seattle and it's Kubiak and they're running the football a ton, then all of a sudden it kind of changes the expectations. I think, we're looking at somewhere in the middle here for Darnold. I think they'll continue to lean on JSN 100%. They don't really have anybody else that's going to, really move the proverbial needle as far as targets go. I mean, we'll see what they do with A.J. Barner, but, Rashid Shaheed still just much more of a field stretcher. Cooper Kupp, Torrey Horton, I'm just not sure about those guys here. So I still think that JSN, you have to just kind of funnel targets his way and figure out exactly what you want to do when they start to shut him down, and you can kind of open things up for somebody else successfully.
Howard, Keenan Allen going as an 18th round pick. He's unsigned. Unknown, I guess, if he does play football this year. It feels like he wants to just kind of miss training camp and then show up kind of like he did the last couple of years. Pretty impressive season last year for kind of relative to expectations in LA. But there's a lot of reports that he only wants to play in LA. So does that leave him the Chargers? Does that leave him the Rams? Where would you like to see Keenan Allen sign? There's been a lot of buzz about the Colts. And does he kind of provide this potential value for a main event team in the 18th round? Because you would have to think when he does sign that ADP is going to jump up a fair bit when he does sign with whatever team he chooses to sign with.
You know what? I'll say I hope he goes to the Rams. Because I don't want to see him screwing up the value of Ladd McConkey, right? I'm just starting to come around a little bit more on Quentin Johnston. I'm still a big fan of Trey Harris. I'm still a big fan of Aronde Gadsden. I don't need Keenan Allen there with the Chargers. I hope that. I hope he signs at Del Boca Vista Phase 2, right? and he plays intramural football at the Raisin Ranch down in Florida. That's what I'm hoping to see. I think anywhere he goes, I mean, I feel like he's much more of like a player coach at this point in his career, right? He's there to help school. He's going to be there to help teach the wide receivers what they need to be doing, but he's also going to be there to help like the nickel corners learn how to properly cover a slot receiver, right? That's where Keenan Allen is for me. I don't know if I would draft him, even if he lands somewhere. I mean, if he says he wants to go to LA and he lands in with the Chargers, I don't know where he's getting his targets. I don't want to see that. And if he goes to the Rams, he's still going to be behind Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. And I don't even know if they want with the offense that they're running with the 72 different tight ends. I don't even know if they want him over there.
Yeah, and who knows if that's a logical landing point. I mean, I will say if he goes back to the Chargers, he had 81 receptions, 777 yards, 4 touchdowns.
Gross. Yeah.
Nothing. And really the downside is Ladd's going to drop, Quentin Johnston's going to drop, and the Chargers may just become a crapshoot in terms of their receiving weapons, which is no fun. But Allen will definitely be fantasy viable even if he does wind up in LA, because the targets are going to find his way.
Why do you want to put that out there like that, man? Don't put that energy out there.
I'm in the 18th round. I got it.
Who's the boomer now, people? That Aidan's here being like, yeah, give me some Keenan Allen.
Not wrong. I never say give me Keenan Allen. I just said
you just did.
If you're giving me 18th round Keenan Allen, I'll take a dip in that pool just to just to get some exposure in the case he does kind of go to a high-powered offense, and he probably will put up some fantasy relevant weeks. Howard, we are in round 20. I know you already kind of dropped it, but I want you to drop them again. Where can we find you? Where can we find your work? Where can we listen to you? Please do that before this draft concludes. It's important. The most important thing, arguably, on this stream.
All right. Thank you. All right. So on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, it's RotoBuzzGuy. On TikTok, it's at The Real RotoBuzzGuy, because I guess somebody stole RotoBuzzGuy right out from under me there. I don't know why, but that's what happened there. You can find me on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on the Fantasy Alarm Show. You can find a bunch of my work over at Fantasy Alarm. If you're a New Yorker and you like reading the New York Post, I do a weekly fantasy baseball column and a weekly fantasy football column in the New York Post. I do some fun stuff over at rtsports.com, and I think that's it. I think that's where you got me. I don't know. Are you going to be in Vegas for National Fantasy Football Draft Day on August 21st?
I fear I will not be, but I will be there for the FFPC live events in the days leading up to week 1. That is going to be my time in Vegas. So anyone in the chat, please come visit me. You'll see my big 6'7" gangly ass walking around those live events with a camera.
Are you 6'7"?
6'7".
Ah, that's always the funniest part about our industry, is that I meet people at different conferences and stuff like that, and I'm always like, oh, you seem a lot taller in person, or you seem a lot shorter in person here. You can never get anybody's height down properly.
Yes, I've gotten multiple times that people were shocked with how tall I was, and they thought I was short based on my appearance on these shows, which I didn't know if I should take that negatively or what. I don't know what appearing short on a little box meet, but I appreciate everyone who comes up. We got 2 picks left. Howard, I'm going to leave one final word from you, and I just kind of want for all the listeners, what's your kind of biggest piece of advice for anyone as we kind of hit peak drafting season here in August through the first couple weeks of September, whether they're drafting for $1 million in the main event or or they're just, drafting in their home league. What is your one thing you want to leave for everyone drafting over the next 5 weeks?
Figure out your plan and stick to it as much as you can. You're going to see changes in strategies within the first 3 or 4 rounds, if that's the case, right? I mean, just, it's about letting the board drop to you. As so many people come to me and they're like, who do I take with the 4th pick? Who do I take with the 5th pick? Who you take in the first round, unless you're taking somebody who's not in the overall consensus top 12. I don't even like consensus rankings, but if you're taking somebody outside of that, then you might be making a mistake. But if you're sitting there and you're taking a JSN or a Puka Nacua or an Amon-Ra or a Genty or a Jonathan Taylor, that whoever you take in the first round, fine. Just take the guy you want. Take the guy who you want to build your team around, and then build your strategy around that, whether it's robust RB, hero RB, anchor RB, zero RB, whatever you want to do, right? Make that decision there, but then really stick to it, right? Really, if you constantly change gears throughout your entire draft because you're just, these guys got sniped from you, these guys didn't get sniped, you're going to be all over the place. Pay attention to what you want to do, how you want your team at the end to look, not specific players, but how many guys, do you want the mobile QBs? Do you want to wait on QB? Are you looking to go bell cow heavy? What wide receiver, pocket do you feel the most comfortable with? And just be able to fish from those different parts. Never just go into the draft thinking you're going to wing it.
Wise words from a wise man. Thank you to everyone who drafted in the FFPC main event. We got drafts now filling every day. So if you want to come compete for $1 million in our flagship contest, please sign up. Its contest is already over 50% full. Howard dropped all his socials, all places you could find his work. Please go give him a follow and listen to him, read his work. He's amazing. We will see everyone in Vegas who's going to be there. And more importantly, we will see you on August 18th, Tuesday at 9 p.m., I believe. We're covering an FFPC best ball tournament draft. Terp and Jake will be back. Then I'll have more news on kind of what's going down that Tuesday. Thank you to everyone who liked. Thank you for everyone who was commenting. As I said, we will see you guys on the 18th.